Hello and welcome to the Supportive Care Services Lunch and Learn series. My name is Vontel Hunter with the Ironwood Cancer Research Center's Marketing Department. The Supportive Care Services Department has created a series of live lunch and learn videos to help you be successful when navigating your cancer journey. Our Supportive Care Services Department is here to help you get actively involved in your healing process. About the Supportive Care Services Department, please email socialwork@ironwoodcrc.com. Today's featured speaker is Jessica Wells, licensed clinical oncology social worker. Today she will discuss self-care in the new year. Let's all welcome Jessica.
Thank you so much, Fonzel, and good morning to each and every one of you, and Happy New Year. I hope you all had an amazing holiday season, and of course, you're staying safe during these continued global pandemic that we're having. So, self-care in the new year, why is that important? Why did, Supportive Care Services choose to start with self-care this year? It's I feel like self-care has become this buzzword out in society, but I think there are several myths that go along with it. So I'm very happy to share with you today about that. As Vonzel mentioned, my name is Jessica Wells. I'm a social worker. I cover all of our East Valley offices here for Ironwood. I've been with Ironwood actually about 4 years now. And Ironwood is very near and dear to my heart. For those of you that may not know, I was diagnosed and treated right here at Ironwood. So I'm very fond of the organization, and I just love that I'm able to now be here in a professional capacity and giving back with all of you. So self-care in the new year, let's kind of get started and go from there. So what is self-care? Webster Merriam defines it as the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health. It's also been noted that self-care is the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during times or periods of stress. So self-care is very broad, and it can encompass a variety of aspects in our life, from hygiene, nutrition, lifestyle choices that we're making, as well as environmental factors, where we're choosing to live, socioeconomic factors, and self-medication. So I want to be clear, here's what self-care is not. Self-care is absolutely in no way selfish. I hear so often from a lot of patients or their caregivers or other family members, oh, I don't have time for self-care, I have to take care of somebody else, or that's selfish, or, I like to help others, it's not about me. But self-care is not a selfish act. It's about self-preservation. It's about recognizing when your soul needs a little bit more, and listening to your body and doing things to pour into yourself. Self-care is also not a fad. For those of you that may be social media savvy, I'm sure you may have heard, hashtag self-care Sunday, or people are at a glorious spa day and it's hashtag self-care, or the whole treat yourself phenomenon. So while those types of things are great, we all like to buy ourselves, a treat here and there. That is not the end all be all when we are talking about self-care and what it includes and encompasses. Self-care is not also the same for everybody. We're all unique individuals. Therefore, what may make my soul and spirit feel restored may not be the same for somebody else and the next person. Self-care is also not a sign of weakness. I hear a lot, or, I can take care of things, I don't need to do this, so on and so forth. And it's looked at as only the weak are doing this. Lies, fallacies, fairy tales, you guys. It is a sign of strength to have an established self-care practice and routinely practice it. So here's what self-care is: an absolute necessity. every single day, multiple times a day. It is a necessity. Just like you need food, water, shelter, you also need self-care. Self-care is also an intentional act. It is something that we are intentionally doing to help make ourselves well. It is recognizing when we need a little more of something, more rest, more love, more healing, whatever it may be. It's also constantly changing. So the practice that you have today may not be what you do tomorrow to make yourself feel well, and that's perfectly okay. I always think of, and I describe when I'm in counseling sessions with patients, I talk about a metaphorical toolbox, right? So for example, if you get a flat tire, you don't pull out a nail and a hammer to fix the tire. It's not going to work. You're going to be there forever trying to get the tire repaired. But what you do is you pull out the tire iron, the jack, a new tire, and you get yourself back on the road. So in our metaphorical toolbox, we are going to have a variety of metaphorical tools that help us with self-care. So that if there is a day where you're feeling more anxious, you then dig through the metaphorical toolbox and you pick out those things that are going to help calm and ease your anxiety. If it's depression-related symptoms, again, you're going to go to that toolbox and you're going to get those things that are going to maybe help you with the depressive symptoms, so on and so forth. And it's good to have a robust offering of those things, which we'll kind of talk about a little bit later on. But you don't want to just have one thing, because if you end up having a bad day and that one thing doesn't work, sometimes that can cause a downward spiral, and that's what we don't want to happen. Self-care is also rejuvenating. It can be so invigorating when you just have that sense of calm and that sense of peace where you're feeling like, whew, okay, I feel like I can get through the next 5 minutes. I feel like I can get through the next hour, the next day, the next week, the next month. Self-care is also a form of self-love and self-compassion, recognizing that while you're giving grace to those that you're interacting with, those that are also in your life, it's equally as important to be pouring into yourself and loving on yourself and showing yourself the same amount of grace and compassion that you often show to those around you. Why is it important? Why are we talking about self-care? Why in society do you always hear self-care, self-care? Well, for one, it helps to increase your resiliency and it helps strengthen our ability to cope. Again, let's go back to that metaphorical toolbox, right? So if we have, say, 50 items in there, metaphorically speaking, of course. So if we have those 50 items in there and something happens, there's 50 things that we can kind of rummage through to help us feel better. And what you may find out happens as a result is over time, it may not take you as long to rummage through those things to find what's going to be helpful. You may remember, oh, hey, last time I was feeling anxious, I did a deep breathing exercise. That was really helpful. Let me just default to that and see if that works. And you can have a heightened awareness of what your body needs and when it's starting to feel unwell. Self-care is also important because you can't pour from an empty cup. This is absolutely one of my absolute favorite quotes. And during the caregiver support group that I facilitate, I tell this to all of the caregivers that are present. You can't pour from an empty cup. And I think the most important part of this is recognizing when your cup is getting too low and you need to refill it. So there may be a day where you can pour from your cup until you have just one drop left and you're still feeling well and can say, hey, okay, now's a good time for me to refill my cup. But there may be a day where your soul and spirit are a little bit more heavy, you're not physically feeling well, where you pour out one drop and that's too much, and even though your cup may look full, according to what you're feeling, it's not. And that's when you need to engage in those self-preservations and do some self-care. Think back to, pre-COVID times when we were freely traveling. When you were on an airplane, what was one of the first things that one of the flight attendants would say when they're doing their safety features? They tell you that in the event of emergency, if the oxygen pressure or the air pressure changes, they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first and then help those around you. And that's self-care. You can't give to others what you don't possess yourself. So if you are constantly pouring out all of your energy, all of your strength, all of that into somebody else, what are you keeping for yourself? What does self-care look like? A lot of times, again, people immediately think those grandiose types of displays, spa days, mani-pedis, shopping sprees, French Riviera cruises, those things that are more extravagant. But self-care is actually a lot more simplistic. Self-care can be setting boundaries. So take note of those people around you that you interact with. Is there somebody that you engage with where you feel as though your energy has been completely drained once your time with them is over? Are there any relationships in your life that you feel may be toxic or you feel cause you to act out of character? Putting a boundary in place with them is a form of self-care. Allowing yourself to accept help. I see this a lot sometimes with patients where they are just completely overwhelmed with all of the love and support that loved ones are giving them, that they don't know how to allow themselves to be helped. After a diagnosis, a lot of times loved ones will say, hey, if you need anything, let me know. And oftentimes you may not be able to think of what you might need, but it could be asking, hey, could you come over and wash these dishes for me? Or could you come over and help my significant other fold the laundry? Or hey, would you mind taking my kids out for an ice cream cone or just to take a walk around the block? Asking for help and allowing yourself to accept that help is a form of self-care. Saying no. Vonzell and I were talking earlier about no being a complete sentence. Knowing when to say no is a form of self-care. If you're tired, exhausted, from maybe a treatment and one of your friends calls and is like, hey, can I come over? If you're not feeling up to it, it's okay to say no. That's a form of self-care. They will understand if they are your people. And they understand and know what you're going through. They're not going to take offense to you saying, hey, no, I'm not feeling well today. Another day might be better. So just keeping those things in mind. I think I highlighted these specific things simply for the fact that I think that these are the things that most often get overlooked when we talk about self-care, because again, a lot of emphasis is often placed on the materialistic side of self-care and what that looks like. So some examples of self-care. Journaling. I'm a huge advocate of journaling. Sometimes it's helpful to just be able to clear your mind, clear your thoughts, dump out everything that's kind of occupying space rent-free in your brain and mind, right? You don't have to do it when it's just a bad day. I know sometimes I have patients who just journal when they're having bad days. But if they go back and read it, it can have the opposite effect because all they're reading is documented instances of all of their bad days. So, journaling when today was a really good day, I'm feeling really well today. Treatment went well today. Documenting those types of things can be helpful. Meditation. There's all different forms of meditation. There's a variety of meditation apps, Calm, Headspace. YouTube has a variety of different meditations that can be utilized. Anything that you can do to just kind of, again, bring a sense of calm to your person and to your body. Now, if you're someone who feels as though meditation isn't for you, that's absolutely okay. That may not be self-care for you, because again, the point of self-care is to feel rejuvenated. It's to walk away feeling as though you've been restored and feel like you're kind of back at that place of balance and healing. If meditating is going to cause you any type of anxiety or stress, I would suggest finding something else to utilize. Gratitude. Gratitude is a huge form of self-care. I think we can all agree that last year, the year 2020, was very difficult and challenging for a variety of reasons. But practicing gratitude can help shift your focus and your thought process to being one that's more positive in nature, and therefore can help be restorative and rejuvenating to your soul. So in terms of gratitude, I usually recommend and challenge patients to write down 3 things every day that they're grateful for. The caveat is, for the next day, you can't list whatever you listed the day before. So for today, if I list that I'm grateful for food, shelter, clothing, I can't list those 3 things tomorrow. And the next day, I can't list anything previous. And so what I often note happens is that once we get past those materialistic things, it becomes a little bit harder for us to immediately think of things that we might be grateful for. But eventually our mind starts to focus on those things that have maybe a little bit more significance, whether it's the deep connections we have with friends, with family, the relationships, our work relationships, those types of things. That can be a form of self-care. Reprioritizing tasks, something that is so simple and often gets overlooked as a form of self-care. I'm a huge fan of to-do lists. And so going through and reprioritizing, what are the things that have to get done today, and focusing on those and not being so stressed and overwhelmed. So for example, if retiling your roof is on there, is that something that absolutely has to get done today? Or is it something that you see on your list day after day that's going to cause you a bunch of stress and anxiety or depression because you haven't had an opportunity to get to it? If that is the case, let's take it off the list and put that on more so the long-term goals list, if you will. But just that basic reprioritization can be so helpful in restoring that sense of balance to yourself. Good sleep hygiene is another. How are you sleeping? Are you having a good, sound, restful sleep? Are you waking up frequently? Are you not having a good bedtime routine? Whether it's, say, an hour before bed, shutting down electronics, washing your face, brushing your teeth, taking a shower, drinking a hot cup of tea, doing something that's relaxing, that's going to trigger your brain and body to know, hey, it's shutdown time. That can be a form of self-care. Using sick leave, a form of self-care, right? Self-care helps prevent and lessen burnout, whether it's, in the work environment, if you're someone that is homebound, again, making sure you're taking breaks from maybe the household chores and tasks that you have delegated for yourself that particular day. And even taking lunch breaks. How often, for those of you that might be working, do you work through your lunch break? I know that I've done it, right? But I've made a conscious effort to, let's schedule this 30-minute time slot. And I know for that 30 minutes, I'll be eating lunch, and that's my lunch break. Even if it only takes you 10, 15 minutes to eat, do something with that rest, with the remaining time, that's going to be restorative to your soul in that moment. Taking a walk, calling a friend, doing a quick meditation, or just sitting in silence. So some key things to remember. Self-care is non-negotiable, you guys. Again, something every single day that you should be doing. In my support groups, I often challenge the participants to practice self-care at least 30 minutes a day, to set aside time, at least 30 minutes a day, to intentionally engage in self-care. If you feel like, oh, I'm not going to have time for that, how do you figure that all in, so on and so forth, schedule it. Treat it as though it's a doctor's appointment. I know that you all are making sure you're attending all of your doctor's appointments, labs, scans, testing, anything else that's required of you. Put the self-care in the appointment and schedule some time. Again, it doesn't have to be anything grandiose. It could be sitting down and having the cup of coffee to start your day off, drinking a cup of tea, reading the newspaper, journaling, any of those types of things. And I think a key component also too is asking yourself, is this meaningful to me? And is this honoring to me? And if you're engaged in an activity and you're saying, okay, is this meaningful to me? Right now, I'm in the middle of Target. Is it meaningful for me to be in Target right now? If the answer is no, then maybe there's an opportunity to do something different, and maybe just stop aimlessly, walking up and down the aisles or browsing the $1 section, and go do something that's going to be more restorative to you, something that's going to be more meaningful and honoring to and for you. Same thing with those interactions, going back to the boundaries. If you're talking with somebody or interacting with someone, is this a meaningful interaction to me? If not, maybe there's an opportunity to put in a boundary there as a means of some self-preservation and to just kind of help yourself out in those moments. I saw this quote earlier and I thought it was so perfect. It said, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that's by Audre Lorde. And again, you guys, it is so, so important. Yes, it's great to be compassionate to those around us and help out others and those types of things. But we also need to take time to drop in and check in with ourselves to see how ourselves are doing. How often do you sit and ask yourself, what do I need today? How am I feeling today? Is there a little bit, do I need a little bit more oomph today, right? And if you do, finding something that's going to be restorative to your soul. Maybe one day that self-care is you're laying on the couch binge watching 15 seasons of a show and eating some ice cream. If that's going to make you feel refreshed and rejuvenated and give you a sense of wholeness, then by all means do that. However, if you're going to have a sense of guilt as a result of having watched those 15 shows or something like that, then maybe that's a trigger or a signal to you to engage in another activity at that time to kind of help increase your self-care. So that is about it for that piece. Are there any questions? I'll turn it back over to Von Val.
Thank you, Jessica, for that very informative presentation. And we do have questions from our digital audience. Okay. Our first question is, I often find myself holding on to negative thoughts. How can self-care help me?
Oh gosh, there's so many different things. So when we talk about negative thoughts, I always say it's easier to go negative, right? If I were to say right now, list 5 things that are going wrong, we can rattle them off. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? But reframing, stopping those catastrophizing thoughts. So if it's a moment where you're having a negative thought of, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I would maybe do an activity that you know that you're good at that will give you a sense of pride. If you're really good at playing the piano, sit down and play a song that will give you that sense of accomplishment of, oh my gosh, I am a good piano player. Engaging in those practices as well. There's also some different cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, techniques as a result to reframing that can also be implemented. For example, if it's a catastrophizing thought of, oh my gosh, it's going to be like this forever, right? We're catastrophizing that. We're saying that things are always going to be that way. There's nothing that can ever make it better. But if we stop ourselves in that moment and say, this is really hard right now. I know that it may get better and it probably will, but for right now, this is really, really hard. Allow yourself the opportunity to feel that. It's okay to feel the feels. It's okay to have that healthy range of emotion, but then do something that's going to help make you well in that moment, whether it's a hot shower, putting on your warm, fuzzy socks, eating some ice cream, whatever it is. Acknowledge the negative thought. Try to reframe it if you can, and then give yourself a coping skill, right? We talked about that metaphorical toolbox, rummaging through that toolbox and then picking out what you need in that moment. If you find you're still struggling with that, feel free to reach out to me. I offer counseling to patients, and one of the things that we do is talk about reframing some of those negative thoughts, and I'd love to help you and talk with you in greater detail on things more specific to you.
Thank you for that answer. The second question is, I am a people pleaser and often put others before my own needs. What are some things I can do to change this behavior?
Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. The beautiful thing about boundaries is you get to decide what they are, and you get to be the one that sets them. And I always say, when setting boundaries, those people in your life, if they're really your people, if they really love you, if they really have your best interest in mind, they are going to understand and respect that boundary. It could be starting very small with just saying no. Hey, can you go pick up groceries for me and 15 other people in my family? If you don't have the ability to do it or just don't feel like it, saying, no, unfortunately, I'm not able to help you with that. Or if you are, but that particular day is not a good day. Today's not a good day for me. Tuesday at 5 o'clock is good. And then it allows them to decide, okay, so she can't do it today, he or she can't do it today, but Tuesday at 5 o'clock is good. If Tuesday at 5 o'clock works for them, then great. But if not, then it allows them to find an alternative option. So again, just starting very small and figuring out a boundary that's going to be most meaningful and honoring to and for you. You don't want to set a boundary that you're not able to maintain. So think of, a little kid that's like, I'm never going to talk to you ever again. And then 2 seconds later, they're asking you to play with them. They're not able to maintain that boundary. So you don't want to set a boundary that's so outlandish, you're not going to be able to keep it up. So that can be super helpful. I would start with maybe saying no, seeing how that works. Where are some opportunities in your life where you can either say no, or if there's a portion of a request that people are asking of you, a way where you can address just that portion that feels good to you while allowing them to figure out the remainder, if that makes sense.
Now, I received a follow-up question in regards to boundaries. It says, what if I live with the person I need to set boundaries with? I'm afraid it may cause conflict.
Okay. And again, I think that's where it comes down to looking at what are boundaries that are going to be most meaningful and honoring to and for you in that situation. So, for example, if it's, I'll pick something kind of big, it's somebody that's eating your food in the refrigerator or something like that, right? A simple request of, hey, so-and-so, I would really appreciate it if you don't eat my food. I work really hard for it, or, I've been saving up this leftover whatever, and I've been thinking about it all day and I really want to eat it. again, having that initial conversation with them using an I feel statement. I feel disrespected when I go to the refrigerator to get my food and my food is gone. Communicating with them in that way, and then putting the boundary in place. So if they're still eating the food, letting them know, figuring out what's going to be meaningful and honoring to you. So if it's okay, so now I'm going to get a small size fridge and place that in my room and put all of my food that is exclusively for me in that. And then any food that's community food will go in the big fridge. Something simple like that. Again, the boundaries can be hard, especially if it's somebody that's used to kind of taking advantage or is used to engaging in some type of manipulation tactic. It can be hard to start to set that boundary, but you can start small and increase from there. And again, of course, I'm more than happy to help more specifically with that as well. You can definitely reach out to me to schedule an appointment if you'd like. If you find that you're still struggling in that regard or just want some more specific information regarding your personal situation.
Thank you for that. The next question is, physical connection is important to me, and with COVID, I am unable to see my family. What self-care tools would you recommend to help me with my loneliness?
Oh God, this has been such a hard one to combat this past year and with this pandemic. One of the things that I have found helpful personally that I started doing with my friends and family were a lot using technology. And I know it gets hard. I think a lot of people have Zoom fatigue and, we're kind of tired of looking at the screens. But there's a different, one of the apps that we use is House Party, and it allows all of your friends, family, whoever, they download the app, you guys go into a room, and there's a variety of games on there that you can play together. So we have game nights. Doing something like that, or just being able to talk to people, the FaceTime, sometimes using more creative outlets. And I know that can be very, very difficult in this time because we're used to, I'll just drive over to my friend's house, or we'll get together in a community space and, share food, conversation, those types of things. Getting creative, thinking outside of the box, and finding something that's going to work for you and be meaningful and honoring to and for you. If you feel comfortable, going and sitting on a park bench someplace and just drinking a cup of coffee or tea and just people watching and seeing what other people may be doing, or watching some ducks in a pond or something like that. If that's within your realm of comfortability, doing something like that. But trying to just think out of the box and be more creative tends to be the most helpful during this unprecedented time.
And our final question is, my finances are the biggest source of stress in my life. How can self-care help me manage it better?
Well, I think for finances, looking at what's the biggest piece of it. Is it, co-pays associated with treatment and those types of things? If that's a stressor, reach out to us at Supportive Care Services. There are a variety of nonprofit organizations that help offset the cost of treatment by helping with a household bill. They'll pay a rent or mortgage, a utility bill, some other household expense to help alleviate that cost. So if it's something related to your care that you're in treatment that you're receiving through Ironwood, please reach out to us so that we can put you in contact and help you out with some of those things. And I think financial boundaries can be helpful as well too, where it's, okay, how can I trim the fat, if you will, right? Are there some expenses that I have that maybe are not necessities? What are the necessities? And saying, okay, for the next 30, 60, 90 days, I'm only going to maybe focus on those necessities. But then also utilizing community resources to supplement. There are a wide variety of community-based organizations that help emergently again with rental assistance, utility assistance, those types of things. And especially now with COVID, a lot of the organizations as well have funds that are specifically earmarked by those who are maybe facing financial challenges as a result of that. So I think asking for help and acknowledging that you need some assistance is the form of self-care, right? We talked about knowing when to ask for help and accepting that help. That's you asking the question already, you're starting that self-care process. So reaching out, asking for those resources and supports, again, we're more than happy to provide you with any information that might be of assistance. So definitely reach out to myself, Nicole. We're more than happy to do what we can to try to assist you.
Jessica, I'd like to thank you for this wonderful presentation on self-care. I'd also like to thank our digital audience for joining us for this Lunch and Learn presentation, Self-Care in the New Year, featuring licensed clinical oncology social worker Jessica Wells. We really hope you enjoyed this session. There will be a replay of this Lunch and Learn on the Ironwood YouTube and social media channels. Be sure to join us next week for Insurance 101, featuring Supportive Care Services Coordinator Sierra Endicott. For more information regarding our Supportive Care Services classes and events, email us at wellness@ironwoodcrc.com. Thank you for spending the afternoon with us. Goodbye.